All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, class. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody this morning? Doing okay? All right. Looks like we got a light crew today, a lighter crew today, so it appears. One, two, three. All right. So we have some unique things happening. Number one, I'm pitch hitting this morning. Brother Steve Ham is actually going to close out our study on the minor prophets, but he is at home with his recovering wife, and so I'm pitch hitting for him this morning. We're going to continue our study of the book of Micah. So if you will, make your way to Micah, and we'll we'll sort of dig into that in just a few minutes. That's the first thing. And so here we are. This is the month of March. This is a 5-Sunday month. So that's one unique thing about this month. Also, too, if the weather predictions are correct, we are in store for a springy 71-degree day today, to be followed by a 43-degree day tomorrow. So, so enjoy it while you can. Enjoy the 70. But as the week goes on, I think, again, if it holds, I mean, by the time we get to Friday, it's going to be almost 80 degrees on Friday. It'll be like 78 degrees. Yeah, bring it on, the coach says. Bring it on. So if the trend holds, we'll have, really, we'll be touching close to summer temperatures close to the end of this week. But just be mindful of that. It's easy to get sick when the weather changes that drastically as well. So just be mindful. But warm day today, cool day tomorrow, and then we'll progressively get warmer as the week goes. Okay, so Book of Micah. Brother Steve got us kicked off last Sunday, and really gave us, if you were here, or if you participated online, or if you went back to view the class that he presented a lot of background historical information about Micah. I mean, a lot. I'm not going to dare try to recover all of the things that he did, but lots of background information in terms of where the prophet was from, some things that were happening during the time of the prophet's ministry, and so on and so forth. There are two things, or maybe three things, I do want to lift, though, just as a reminder, because I do think it will have some bearing as we actually begin studying chapter 1, and maybe, if time permits, chapter 2. But we'll hit chapter 1 for sure today. But I do want to remind us of something that Brother Steve pointed out to us. And one of those things is that Micah had some contemporaries. In other words, there were some other prophets whose ministries overlapped with Micah's. And we'll see that very clearly as we just look at chapter 1, verse 1. But just keep in mind, we just studied Hosea. And so part of Hosea's ministry overlapped with Micah's. Amos, there's a connection there. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint the exact dates, but either there was a brief overlap, or perhaps Micah's ministry began right when Amos's ended. And then Isaiah. So the prophet Isaiah, the prophet Hosea, and Amos all had some overlap in terms of the times when, or the time frame when their prophetic ministries took place. All right, so I do want to remind us of that. Let me see what else we got here. Let me just, as I prepare for this class today, also, I just to help it make sense to me, and I hope to make sense to you, I really had to sort of dig a little bit more into kind of the timing of this. And so I'm going to share a few things that I hope will help make the things that Micah was called to say and the message that he was called to deliver. I hope that it will make it clearer. So let me just see what we have here. All right, so let's start before we look at, go ahead and turn to Micah chapter 1, but before we read anything, I just want to level set a couple things to remind us what the lay of the land was and so on and so forth. You remember this map? I've shown this map for going back to when I think we started with the prophet Joel and then Jonah and so on and so forth. But this map is intended to show sort of the lay of the land. That first arrow, that dark blue, is the northern kingdom, and then that pink or salmon color is the southern kingdom. And again, remember, in Jewish history, remember when the nation sinned, we had, the kingdom was united at one time, and the kings who were in place, you had Saul, you had David, and you had Solomon. Remember that? But then after the nation sinned, and then God, part of the punishment was that and Solomon in particular, but that he split the nation. They're still all Jews, let's be clear. They're still all kinsmen, but then we had a northern kingdom, that's the dark blue, and the southern kingdom, the pink color. The capital of the northern kingdom, can you see it in the blue, the star? Can you see it? What's the capital of the northern kingdom? Can you see that star? Samaria. What's the king? And then the capital of the southern kingdom is, you see the star there is what? Jerusalem. Very good. They're all kinsmen. They're all Jews. They all still are part of they still have the covenant relationship with God, but they are split, a split kingdom. And it is during the period of time, roughly 400 years or so, when that kingdom was split, that's the time when the minor prophets prophesied. That's the time frame when the minor prophets prophesied during the 400 years or so when the kingdom was split. Now, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, and then you heard me say in many classes before that look at all those heathen nations that surrounded them. In the northwest corner, you have the Phoenician states, Tyre and Sidon, and so on and so forth. Below it, in the southwestern corner, you have the Philistia, or the Philistine city-states, in Gaza and Ashdod and other places like that. You see in the southernmost part, the yellow, the kingdom of Edom. I added, my map wasn't big enough, so I added Babylon. Much further out to the east is Babylon. You see the kingdom of Ammon, that orange color. Just north of Ammon, you see, it says the kingdom of Aram, but then in red it says Syria. And then north of that, north of Syria, is Assyria. That's a different nation. I know the names sound similar, Syria and Assyria. And all of these heathen nations surrounded the northern and southern kingdoms. You guys remember this, right? Okay, I'm sharing this for a reason. I mean, this is not a geography class, I promise you, but I'm sharing it because I think it helps to give some visibility into the prophecies of not just Micah, but the prophecies of many of the other minor prophets as well. So, we good on this map? All right, let's keep going. This is a crowded slide. I know, I'm gonna help it, wait for your eyes to adjust, and I'll walk you through what I want you to see on this crowded slide. First of all, let me just start by saying that the further left you go on this map, the further back in time you go, right? The further right you go, the further forward in time you go, right? And so with BC, we sort of we age it backwards, so to speak. And so as we head to the right on this map, we're moving forward in time. So where I'm standing here with this, the squiggly lines mean approximately or around 835 BC. So from 835 BC to roughly 415 BC, that's when the kingdom was split, and that's when the minor prophets prophesied. And if I kept going right, you don't see it on this slide, but if I kept going right, we'd be moving towards the birth of Jesus and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Right? Again, this is older in time where I'm standing, and the more I go forward, I am moving forward in time. Okay. This is what I want you to see on this crowded map. At the very top, you see I have there that Amos's ministry. And remember, I told you Amos, Hosea. Oh, I messed up. I was sleepy. Amos, Hosea, and I got Hosea on there twice, right? That orange box should say Micah, not Hosea. So pretend that it says Micah. Pretend that that orange box that says around 735 BC, pretend that that says Micah. But those three men prophesied, they had overlap in their prophecies. Amos was probably the first out of the gate around 755 BC. But about 15 years later, Hosea comes on the scene. And then about 5 or so years later, Micah comes on the scene. You see that? Yes? Give me this or this. All right, good. We got that. Okay. So that's when those ministries began. Now, you see the boxes with the green stars? Those are historical events when God allowed other nations to come in and either attack or take captive his people for punishment. For example, around 725 BC, the northern kingdom, Israel, falls to Assyria. And you can read about that in 2 Kings chapter 17. About 25 years later, around 700 BC, Assyria invades the southern kingdom. And you can read about that in 2 Kings 18. And then a couple of, or 150 or so years later, Babylon comes and exiles the southern kingdom around 586 BC. Now, here's why I'm sharing that with you. Micah, I know the orange box says Hosea, it should say Micah, but Hosea too, and Amos, all of them, when they prophesied, part of their message to the people was that God was going to punish them. And part of what they prophesied about was the fact that Assyria was going to invade them at some point because of their sin. And Babylon would eventually take them exiled because of their sin. Their prophetic messages, as they were prophesying about their sin and the punishment that God would bring, the events that they primarily were talking about were the 700 BC event and the 586 BC event. Tell me if that's clear. Does that make sense? All right. The reason I'm going to such great lengths to explain that is because I think now as we start reading the book of Micah, and certainly I should have covered this way before we did Hosea and Amos as well. But if you understand that those invasions hadn't happened yet, again, Micah begins around 735, and he's prophesying about something that's going to happen about 30 years later. He's also prophesying about something that's going to happen about 150 years later. And he's showing, and he's telling the people, same with Hosea, same with Amos, that you guys have been in sin, God's not happy with you, he's going to punish you. Now, one last thing before we start reading. Those, so far, I know we haven't read Micah yet, but when Amos prophesied and Hosea prophesied, yes, those men prophesied about punishment that God was going to send. Did they say anything else, or did they just talk about the punishment? Did their message include anything else other than that God would punish them? Yes, so what's that? Mercy. So their messages also included, yes, that God will punish their sin, but God would also ultimately be merciful to them and restore them. And that's the hope that we get. God absolutely hates sin. But Mark Boozer, I think, said it best. I think, Mark, you said it a week or two ago, that God always wanted them back. I think that's how you said it, right? That's a great message. God hates sin, he punishes sin, but he wants his people back. And there's hope in that message. That applies today. He still hates sin, and he wants us back. And so we can see his grace, we can see his mercy play out under the old covenant as well as under the new. Okay? Let's get into it. The book of Micah. Let's get into it. All right, so we're going to read, we'll probably just make it through chapter 1. As we prepare to get into it, I'm going to, one more time, Steve Ham gave us this outline last week. And so I want to give it to you again to help organize your thoughts around what to expect. I think we're only going to get to as far as chapter 1. There are 7 chapters total. In chapter 1, primarily what we see is God announces through Micah his judgment on the people. In chapter 2, we get more in depth about the specifics of their sin. There's a condemnation of the oppressors in the nation. And by the way, Steve let us know that another unique thing about Micah is that his prophetic ministry was actually to both kingdoms, both to the northern and southern. We see instances where some prophets were called to prophesy to either the northern or the southern. His was to both. Judgment announced, condemnation of oppressors, judgment on leaders, chapter 3. Chapter 4, future restoration. That's that hope, that's that grace, that's that mercy. Chapter 5, there's a prophetic announcement about the coming ruler. Who do you suppose that is? Who do you suppose the coming ruler is? Jesus, thank you. So we even see that this prophet, as well as some others, announced the coming of a Savior literally hundreds of years before Jesus came. Chapter 6, the Lord's lawsuit, and chapter 7, lament and hope. Let's get into chapter 1. This is how I want us to progress through chapter 1. We're going to walk through it carefully. So I want to get 2 readers to help me out this morning. 2 readers. Mark will be one, Melissa will be the other. So Melissa, I'm going to ask you to take the first 2, and we're going to pause after each. So I want you to do 1, and then 2 through 7. And then, Mark, you'll take 8, ultimately 8 through 15, Mark, is what you'll take, okay? All right, so let's just go one by one. Micah chapter 1, verse 1 says what?
The word of the Lord that came to Micah of
Yeah, good job.
in the days of Jotham,
Okay.
Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem.
All right, right there, just starting with verse 1. All right, Bible students, all right, I want us to read for understanding. And right out of the gate, no different than the other minor prophets that we've read, right out of the gate, the book of Micah gives us a time stamp for Micah's ministry. So one more time, Melissa just read it. When does it tell us that Micah prophesied? During the days of who? Okay, you all see that? You all see that? Okay, all right, great. If you turn to Hosea, if you turn to the book of Amos, if you turn to the book of Isaiah, most, if not all, of those same kings are mentioned. And that's how we know that they were contemporaries, because the scripture tells us when those men were prophesying. Okay, so it's not a mystery. I'm trying to demystify this, right? I mean, some of this is pretty simple for us. But yeah, if you turned over to Hosea, you would see in fact, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and just quickly do that, and we'll, where am I? I'm in Micah. But yeah, let's just quickly do that, and then, so you have to go backwards, right? Hosea comes after Daniel. So just for good measure, keep your finger on Micah, but in Hosea, I hear the pages turn. If you go backwards, Hosea, right after Daniel, Ezekiel, Daniel, then Hosea, chapter 1, verse 1 says, the word of the Lord, which came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, during the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. They named some other kings, the kings of Israel, but they named the southern kings as well. So again, you would see that sort of thing play out for Isaiah. You'd also see it for Micah and Amos as well. Okay? All right. So 1-1. You left off at 1-1. Now, Melissa, if you don't mind, uh, keep going, please.
Hear, you people, all of you. Pay attention, O earth, and all that is in it. And let the Lord God be a witness against you, and the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And the mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split open, like wax before the fire, like waters poured down a steep place. All this is for the transgression of Jacob, and for the sins of his house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? Therefore I will make Samaria a heap in the open country, a place for planting vineyards. And I will pour down her stones into the valley and uncover her foundations. All her carved images shall be beaten to pieces. All her wages shall be burned with fire. And all her idols I will lay waste. For from the fee of a prostitute she gathered them, and for the fee of a prostitute they shall return.
All right, so we're going to hold here. All right, so again, we're just walking through this. So first of all, we see in verse 1, we see the timing, the time stamp associated with when Micah's prophecy or his prophetic ministry, the time period that it took place. And also, too, what I didn't point out, in the B part, the second part of verse 1, it goes on to say, after it mentions the kings, it says, which he saw concerning who or what, in the second part of verse 1. I heard you, Sister Julie. Say it louder, please. What did you say? Thank you very, very, very good, Sister Julie. And so again, that helps us to understand Samaria, the capital of Israel, Judah, the capital of the southern kingdom, of Jerusalem, the capital of Judah. So it says he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. So that helps us to understand that his prophecy was to direct it to both kingdoms. That's how we know that. No mystery here. We're just sort of reading through it. Melissa just read verses 2 through 7. Did that sound like good news or bad news for the people who were getting that information? Did verses 2 through 7 sound like good news or bad news? Bad news. Again, no mysteries. 2 through 7, then right out of the gate, hear, O peoples. I'm in verse 2. All of you, listen, O earth, and all it contains, and let the Lord God be a witness against you. You never want God to be a witness against you. Never want that. The Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is, future tense, it hasn't happened yet, but the Lord is coming forth from his place. He will come down and tread on the high places of the earth. The mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will be split like wax before the fire, like water poured down a steep place. All this is for the rebellion of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the rebellion of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? What is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? For I will make Samaria a heap of ruins in the open country. He's calling for a bad day. Planting places for a vineyard. I will pour her stones down into the valley and will lay bare her foundations. And in verse 7, he says, all of her idols will be smashed. All of her earnings will be burned with fire, and all of her images I will make desolate. For she collected them from a harlot's earnings, and to the earnings of a harlot they will return. So God is pronouncing judgment against both Samaria and Jerusalem, or the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And before Mark reads verses 8 through 9, so far, what does it sound like God is upset about? Who said that? What'd you say, brother? Okay, so idolatry, it seems for sure, right? And what? So I agree with you. What is it that you saw, Ramon, that makes you believe that? Okay. Okay. All right. So very good. So your version says all the carved images shall be what does it say? Beaten into pieces? Okay, that's good. My version says all of her idols will be smashed. Same thing. So you're right. So God, so far, there may be more, but so far he's calling out idolatry. I will also, to add to what Ramon says, in verse 7, God plainly names it. But if you back up, and when it says in, where is it verse 5? Yep. Where he talks about the high places. That's the other issue. The part of the sin of the nation, and this isn't new, but part of the sin of the nation was they replaced the place of worship that God had commanded them with these so-called high places where they would go and to these alternate locations, these high places, I guess, off on a mountain and worship false gods. So it seems that idolatry is what God is calling out here. Very good, very good. We're doing well. Mark, if you don't mind, 8 and 9, please.
Because of this, I will weep and wail. I will go about barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal and moan like an owl. For her wound is incurable. It has come.
All right, very good. And so God pronounces judgment essentially in the first 7 verses. Verses 8 and 9, this appears to be an initial reaction by the prophet himself. And as he is hearing what God is intending to do, he says, that's not God talking, this is Micah talking. And he says in verse 8, because of this, I must lament and wail. He's expressing sadness, grief. I must go barefoot and naked. I don't know if that's literal or figurative, but I will point out that the prophet Isaiah was called to be naked and go and prophesy as well. I don't know if he means this literally or not, but it happened for real in the case of Isaiah. He says, I must make a lament like the jackals and a mourning like the ostriches. And then in verse 9, and I want to back up just a second. I'm going to come off this screen. This is where I want to be again. Look at my 3 stars again. The boxes with the 3 stars. And so the box with the first star that happens around 725 BC, I want you to notice that it says the northern kingdom, Israel, the northern kingdom falls to Assyria. You can actually read about that event in 2 Kings chapter 17. Northern kingdom falls to Assyria, and then the southern kingdom in the second box falls to, the southern kingdom falls to Assyria around 700 BC. What's the capital of the southern kingdom? Louder, please. Jerusalem is the capital of the southern kingdom. Very good. All right. So in verse 9, when Mark read that, and this is what I want us I want to underscore here. Micah goes on to say, for her wound is incurable, for it has come to Judah. Now, Judah's the southern kingdom. For it has come to Judah. It has reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. And the belief here is that Micah is talking about in that moment, the it that has come to Judah is Assyria. That's the belief. And he says, even to the, notice he says, or my version says, it has reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Does your verse 9 say something different? Mine says the gate. Everybody says the gate, verse 9? Okay. The belief here is that this is a reference, Micah is referencing that event when Assyria comes to Judah and destroys most of the cities there except for Jerusalem. So he says he comes to the gate of Jerusalem. The it is that the forces come to throughout Judah and make their way to Jerusalem. They don't destroy Jerusalem, but they destroy many of the other cities. That's one of the prophetic messages here, all right? I'm just going to pause because Mark's got a lot more to do, 10 through 15. Any questions or comments before we continue? Okay. Okay. Now, before Mark reads 10 through 15, I need to share with you to try to orient your understanding here that 10 through 15, this campaign, this Assyrian campaign against the southern kingdom, it appears that Micah is talking through the different cities that get overtaken during that campaign. And what's interesting about verses 10 through 15 is that this appears to be a poetic description of that southern military campaign when Assyria comes and attacks Judah. There are lots of plays on words and puns that are referenced in verses 10 through 15. I'm going to ask Mark to read it, and then I'll walk us through what the plays on words are. So if you don't mind, I know there are 16 verses in the total chapter, but let's just do 10 through 15, please.
Tell it not in Gath, weep not at all. In Beth Ophrah, roll in dust. Pass on in nakedness and shame, you who live in Shafir. Those who live in Laman will not come out. Beth Ezel is in mourning, his protection is taken from him. Those who live in Marah writhe in pain, waiting for relief, because disaster has come from the Lord, even to the gate of Jerusalem. You who live in Lachish, harness the team to the chariot. You are the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion, for the transgressions of Israel were found in you. Therefore you will give parting gifts to Moresheth Den. The town of Akzib will prove deceptive to the kings of Israel. I will bring a conqueror against you who live in Mareshah. He who is the glory of Israel comes from Jehovah.
Very good. I don't know how you always get the verses, Mark, that have all of those. You got to do it on purpose. You always get the verses always that have all those towns that you have to name that none of us can pronounce. But you did a good job. You did a good job. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I think we're going to close our time this morning with this. We're going to close our time this morning with this. Again, I say to you that verses 10 through 15, you heard Mark mention, I don't know, probably 10 different cities or towns and things and warnings against them. And I want to show you one by one that God is doing more than just kind of pronouncing judgment against these cities. There's also some poetic devices at work here. So let's go one by one. In verse 10, he says, tell it not in Gath. Tell it not in Gath, he says, and weep not at all. Evidently, in Hebrew, the word Gath sounds like another Hebrew word for tell or to tell. And so the pun here or the irony here is that basically when he says tell it not in Gath, he's saying tell it not in a place where you would normally tell something. You see the word play there? Because the word for Gath supposedly sounds like it. It sounds like a Hebrew word for tell. It almost rhymes with that word. So there's one instance there. All right, let's just keep going. Also in verse 10, and Mark, what mine says, it looks like Bethla Ophrah, but how does yours read that second part of verse 10? Beth Ophrah. Okay, all right. All right, so then when he references, he says, tell it not in Gath, weep not at all. At Beth Ophrah, roll yourself in the dust. That term Beth Ophrah or Beth Ophrah means not to weep. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. He says, it doesn't mean not to weep. It doesn't mean not to weep. It means house of dust, pardon me. It means house of dust. The instruction here is to weep not. But he says to them to roll yourself in the dust, which is usually